Okay, is there sound now? All right, so we got sound now. Okay, so normally it'd probably best to just restart the live stream for those that are watching this back again, but sometimes it connects to the Bluetooth and I don't even know where it is to turn it off, so I just turned the Bluetooth off my phone. Okay, guys, so that's always fun when that happens. I don't even know where it is. I don't even know where that device is that it connected to. But anyway, guys, happy Saturday, and I'm taking tomorrow off, so I figured we'd try and do our weekly one on Saturday, and over time we'll figure out what's the best time to do these live streams so that way everybody can join. So far, Sunday at noon's working out pretty good, but hey, we'll always try to just play around with the hours and see when everybody can join in. But looks like we got quite a bit of people here, and I appreciate you all tuning in. Sorry about the no sound issue. I don't even know where that device is, but it always seems to do that when I'm least expecting it. But anyway, guys, how's your Saturday going? I'll read some of your comments. Like I said, when you couldn't hear me, was that we're just here to hang out and talk about Porsches. Kevin says hi. Well, good afternoon, Kevin. Hopefully, everybody's cars are out driving around on this beautiful day. I think it's about 70 here. It's been much cooler during the week, but today is just absolutely beautiful. So, before we get started too deep, I'll just tell you guys I started a members only on YouTube, and basically you can go there and I make special videos for those guys over there. It's similar to my Patreon, but it's all different videos. But it's very similar to the Patreon. Another Kevin asked, and rather than me saying this, that we had two Kevins in there, I'll say Kevin S and Kevin B. So Kevin S asked, did you make it to 944 camp this year? No, unfortunately, I had other plans that weekend, and I can't remember if 944 camp's the same weekend every year, but I want to say it is. But our event, I think it moves around, and I ended up having to go to that event. And I'm actually going to another event next week that's in the same area, so I couldn't get away to both of them, so I had to pick and choose. The other event that I went to was much closer. Mandrake says, every man's dream. Exactly. J Fusion asks, 17 versus 18-inch rims, which do you recommend? Neither one. Say 16 max on these cars, but people love the 17s or 18s. But if I had to choose one or the two, I would go to 17. And then, of course, sometimes we get unrelated comments and we don't answer those. But welcome, guys. We're just hanging out here. I'll show you some of the stuff we're working on here. So that way you don't have to stare at me the whole time. Basically, we've got this 89 2.7 liter here. I think you saw it last week. But now we have the cross member off down there, and we've got brand new motor mounts, and it's getting new power steering lines, like all new power steering lines. They were so bad that they ruined the sway bar bushings and the motor mounts and everything, and it's also getting a new rack. But belts look good. These were done in 2023. We just got in here to inspect them. And yep, just doing some odds and ends. Hopefully we'll have it together this week. And of course we've got the blue, Nautic Blue Turbo here, getting some stuff. It's getting a new radiator and some power steering leaks fixed as well. Nothing as serious as the other car, but so for those of you that went to 944 camp, how was it? All right, well, I see that Saturday 3 p.m. Well, I did give short notice to this live stream, so I'm sure not everybody could make it, but you know, being a Saturday, it's kind of hard to get people in here, but like I said, we're just testing different times, trying to make the best of the situation. I'd really like to move them maybe later on a Sunday, but we'll see. Usually have a little more questions by now, but we'll make it work. You can see we've got a lot of cars out of here. Don't worry about the comments. Just ask your own questions. We just ignore it. I'll delete anything that's just too crazy, but you know, there's nothing that really bothers me. So anyway, guys, yeah, let's see. Sometimes we get kicked into different conversations about stuff, and I got some head gaskets here. Sometimes I just come up with stuff off the top of my head here, so never know what we're going to be doing in the live stream. So sometimes when we watch videos, people ask questions and they get sucked into doing that. So, Dr. Blast asked, is the 944S a simpler machine than the 928? Yes. I wouldn't say that it's just easier to work on. How about that? I wouldn't say that it's like seriously, well, yeah, maybe it is a little bit seriously. You got two banks. Essentially on the 928, you know, you have the belts come up on this side, and it depends on which 928 you have as well. So you could have the 32 valve, or you could have the 16 valve, like, so you'd have 8 on each side, so it'd be essentially 2 of these 944s if you mirrored this here. And I've done the belts on those before, never the 32 valve, but it's not terrible, but it's not as easy as this. And then when you get into the 32 valve, then you've got basically the same thing as a 944S, and you have the chain and everything on there. Well, awesome. Yeah, they're all great cars, and if you can work on the 928, then you'll be able to work on a 944 no problem. Some of the 928s I've worked on were manuals, and sometimes I should just pull the engine to get to some of this stuff. Not a lot of fun. I do get requests to modify 928s and work on them, and I've worked on a few of them before, and I honestly try and just turn them down. I've got too much work with the 944s, I probably got an. I am booked at the moment, well into 2027. So as you can imagine, we try not to dabble with the 928s if we don't have to. I do have a guy wanting me to supercharge his 928s, an early one with the CIS, and I'm happy to do it. We'll see how it goes. But it will be one of those things that I've seen it done, so I know it can be done. And I'm just not a super huge fan of the CIS. Have you ever pulled the body off and leaving the driveline intact? Yeah. And honestly, that's probably the easiest way to do it. Or are you talking about on a 928? On a 944, yeah. Robert says, the 944 turbo, buy or stay away from. Buy it. Don't be scared of them. The problem is, and I tell a lot of people this, and this is the issue that we ran into. So any of these cars that you see in here, I'll tell you, all of these cars that you see in here, except for maybe one that we're turbocharging, that wasn't turbocharged from the factory. All of these cars are from neglect. So every car that you see in here is where the car just kept driving and driving and driving, and nobody ever did any maintenance to it. So here we are 40 years later with someone who now wants the car not to drip on their driveway, and they're going, hey, what do I need to get this to stop? Well, it was abused for 40 years, so you're going to need a lot of stuff. So get a well taken care of, driven but well taken care of car, and you're not going to have any problems with it. So this car, when it originally came to me, had been sitting since 1997 because someone knocked a hole in the oil pan. But here it is, like nearly 10 years after we got it running again, and it runs excellent. But it did get a leak in the radiator. The radiator's old, and it's seriously common to see leaks in the radiator. I don't say every 944 turbo radiator leaks, but they're all gonna leak. It's getting to that age now. But if you can get a 944 turbo, that's what you want, get it. They're not as hard to maintain as other people say. And people go back and forth on getting the 944S with the 16 valve or the turbo, and having worked on tons of them, I would choose the turbo. Well, awesome. Let's see. Big Deal says my 1984 944 just got a service for wheel alignment, but now the steering is very stiff. When steering, someone said maybe air got in the system. From an alignment, that seems kind of odd, but if it's stiff, let's say in a certain portion of when you're turning the wheel, say you turn it right and it's stiff, and then it gets easy, and then you go to turn it back and it's easy, and then it's tough, for instance, and you're just turning it like this and you feel a hard spot and a soft spot kind of deal, then you've got an issue probably with your U-joints on the actual shaft there. It's stiff the whole time. I would start, I mean, for that to flare up right after an alignment is kind of odd. The air would come out the second you turn it lock to lock. So if you go in and you turn it lock to lock, all the air should come out with the engine running. You gotta have the pump running, of course. So I don't think any air got in there, but if you put wider tires on there or something, I could see that being an issue, but from an alignment, it's kind of odd. My only thing that I could think of possibly is that either the pump is starting to fail, the belt came off, or if it's stiff the whole time, then like I would check the belt, check the pump. But if you're, it's like I was saying, if it's only stiff in certain spots, it's probably the shaft itself that needs to be replaced. But it sounds like you probably got a pump issue. I'm gonna open some of this stuff up and we'll play around with it. So this is, let's see, Martin, it says 180 horsepower, turbo, 250 horsepower, owning both an S, better city car, and the modern tensioner. Yeah, I agree. So he says they 180 horsepower S, so you're closer to 190 horsepower with them. 188, I believe. Turbo, 250 horsepower, owning both the S is a better city car and modern tensioner. I do like, so I will say that the 944 S2, the good ones I've driven, that's the way the Porsche should have just made the engine from the beginning. But of course that'd been super expensive back in the early 80s, but those cars drive amazing, and I've got nothing against the S's at all. I've got a few of them, and I was actually considering, when I did my turbo swap on my car, going with the S engine, and because I really like it, but I'm kind of glad I didn't. I really do like the turbo. And if you get the turbos right, so one of the problems that we have a lot around is the turbos at this point. They've got issues with their throttle position switches. They're old, they're 40 years old. You got problems with the cycling valve and stuff, but you get that stuff sorted out and they're they're faster, of course, than an NA off the line. And but a lot of them that come through here with those problems, they are slower than the slug. So and they don't build boost to like 4,000 RPM, and that's just something wrong with them. But I would say that a good turbo should be probably as fast as an S. But city driving, I see where you're coming from. You get that better power down low. But especially in the S2s, God, those are amazing to drive daily in the in the city. J Fusion says, I put a new cam tower gasket on my 87 turbo I bought and upgraded the gasket from Lindsay, and it leaks on my exhaust manifold. Do you have those problems with upgraded gaskets? So I've never tried an upgraded gasket, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm sure maybe it's something that Lindsay makes. Everything that we use is either the Male or the Victor Renz stuff. And as a matter of fact, yeah, I'll show you guys some. So this one's kind of neat. So this is a box I just opened of a head gasket set, and then I'll answer your question. So I got a good deal on these. Usually I use the Victor Renz stuff, but you're gonna see here in a second when I open this up. This gasket looks familiar. It actually even says Victor Renz on it. These gaskets say Victor Renz, and this one here too. So it is basically a Victor Renz gasket set in a Male box. And I actually paid less than this than I did the Victor Renz stuff. So hey, whatever. Yeah, this is just a boxed version of the Victor stuff. Yeah, even the seal there. Look, I just opened this box. So scratch what I said. I've used this kit before, but this is the first time I actually, usually we just open them and throw them on there. And this is the first time I actually opened one and sat down and saw the stuff in here that's basically the same stuff. So we use that. And one of the problems that I see when you're putting the cam tower gaskets on, or cam housing, a lot of people don't like to call it that, but it's something that's got stuck in my vocabulary the past 20 years. But a lot of times when people are putting these on, you can't see where my hand's pointing. Let me grab this gasket here. So I'll give you some tips that may help you out if you got to replace that. So I've got the new gasket here, and I'm just gonna try and sit it on here. Turn you guys around. So, all right, once you get your gasket on here, you're gonna sort of do it like torquing your head gasket. You want to make sure the gasket's gonna lay flat here. So what I do is I just, as you know, that there's gonna be pressure depending on where the cam is, because it's going to try and open these valves. So you always want to make sure that your crank is at mid-stroke where all the pistons are in a line, and you kind of want to be sure that if you turn it clockwise, you can turn it counterclockwise back to TDC. But you're going to notice that maybe this side's up higher, this side's up higher, maybe it's in the center, but you kind of want to get everything in the center, and that's going to be where TDC is anyway, because these valves are going to be closed, these valves will be closed, and then you're going to have these two here. So you'll start here, and you're just going to wind your bolts down. You're going to be you're barely going to want to reach, but you just kind of wind them down by hand. Don't use a tension tool whatsoever. And you're going to start, like, we'll say here, you go to here, here, and then go back to the other side, and then you're going to zigzag across. So if you did the top one over here, you want to do the bottom one over here, and if you did the bottom one over here, you're going to do the top one over here, kind of stuff. So you kind of just zigzag. Once you get to the point where you run it down and it looks like it's flat, you're going to torque it down in a similar pattern. You can go here, 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 then here, then back over here, or however you want to do it. But you just want to start on the outside, because that's going to spread it out a little bit. And once you have it nice and tight, just hand tight with your wrench, you're going to torque each one of these to 15 foot-pounds, and do not go over 15 foot-pounds, because if you go even 15.5 foot-pounds, these things will split right here. You can see that they're just not meant to take much pressure at all, and they're not very, they look bendy, but you can break them just by snapping them like that. And I've never had a problem since. I've done it one time back years and years ago. I put one on here and I had a little bit of a leak, and I thought, well, I'll just tighten it down, and don't do it. But yeah, stop at 15 foot-pounds, leave it alone, and you're good. But if you put 15.5 foot-pounds on this thing, it will break, and then you're doing it again. So been there, done that. Mark says, I use my S2 when spectating at the TGC's track. Needs paint and rear window. Something minor happens, no big deal. Definitely more grunt and better street car than the turbo, or the S or the turbo. I really like the S2s, I really do. Now, modified turbo, on the other hand, now you're not going to convince me it's better than the modified turbo, but I don't like super modified turbos. I don't need one that has more than 300 horsepower. It's plenty quick enough. And I wouldn't be surprised that, like, I've never tested it, and I'm not going to do it unless it went to a track or something, but I'm pretty sure that, like, I want to say that, like, my turbo would probably, like, keep up with the 911s, with the Carrera S. Can that motor haul ass? Well, it depends. We do some mods here. We can make them a lot of fun. You get 170 horsepower in one of these engines with the torque that it has. So I watched a engineering explained video where he was talking about the difference between horsepower and torque, and horsepower is the amount of work being done. So he was like, you can have, for instance, 200 horsepower and 1 foot-pound of torque, and you know 7,000 RPM. But if you can have 1,000,000,000 foot-pounds of torque and 1 horsepower, and the horsepower is going to be better. Well, that's a great theoretical thing to think about, because if you have 1,000,000,000 pounds of torque, then and 1 horsepower, then you can have tons of torque at 0 RPM because there's no horsepower being done. Great in theory, but in reality, you do want more torque at lower RPM because that equals more horsepower at lower RPM. And so that it's kind of a little fanciful way of having fun. But of course, when people are asking about, oh well, the 300ZX back in the day made 160 horsepower, and these cars only made 150 horsepower. Horsepower sells, but you got to remember that you had to wind those 300ZXs way out to the limit to get that 160 horsepower, and the Porsche with the more horsepower, essentially at lower RPM, they were gone by then. Subliminal says 300 horsepower and a car as light as 944 is not bad at all. No, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, it's plenty fun. I think my turbo 24S had about 300 horsepower. I never dynoed it, but I'd done the chips and everything that like I should have been in the neighborhood, you know. But the car weight, I did have the car weight, and it was 2,600 pounds with me in it, because I'd stripped everything, taken everything out of it. It had no AC or anything in it. Mark says, in the day the turbo ran it with fellow 911s. Wait, let me read that. In the day the turbo ran with fellow, yeah. But I think the thing is about the gearing is a little bit better. So you're not going to get like a modern 911 off the line. They'll be gone. I think what they do, 4 seconds, 0 to 60. You're not keeping up with that. But I think once you're on the highway, like you're moving 40 miles an hour at the gearing, and that's when the 944 turbo gearing would really come on. Like you could probably get one from about 40 and up, just regular driving. I asked a few streams back about the failing hood cable. It turned out to be the plastic part where the cable clips in near the handle. Oh, awesome. Yeah, you can get those pretty cheap. So hopefully you were able to get that fixed and put it back in. Dr. Blast asked, have you ever put a V8 into a 944? No, but I've seen it done, and I've actually got a guy that's inquiring about it right now. Not to mention the weight difference. So a lot of these modern 911s will surprise you with the weight. Despite having airbags and all this other stuff that the 944 or some of the turbos, especially early ones, don't have, they're pretty light. They're pretty light. They're all aluminum, so they're pretty light. I'm actually shocked at how light some of these new 911s are, despite how big they are. Not to mention, so Subliminal says, I heard Porsche detuned the 951 so it would be faster than the flagship 911 and hurt the feelings of them. So, yeah, Porsche does everything to a price point. Always have, always will. If you look at the new lineup, the GTS and the 911 Carrera S are the same engine, the same car, but they detuned the Carrera S to not outperform the GTS, and then you move up from there to getting into 3.8 liters. But yeah, everything, the Carrera, which is the base 911, has like 370 horsepower, and then there's basically the same turbos and the same engine as the Carrera S does. So you can take your base Carrera and turn it into a Carrera S with like some new turbos and some different intercoolers and stuff. I don't know the entire thing that they do, but they do tune it to make it a Carrera, and they're all turbocharged now. And then so basically the base Carrera has 150 horsepower or so less, maybe more than that, less than the GTS, but it's all the same engine, it's all the same stuff, I think. And the Carrera S is sitting in the center with like different turbos, and that's about it, the different tune. So when it comes to the 944 turbo, they did not want that encroaching on the 911 at the time. And you got to think, back then they were running out of power with air-cooled engines, so they were turbocharging them. But the more you turbocharge and build up heat in the engine bay, the less power an air-cooled engine can make. Just the more heat and heat builds up. So they were on borrowed time with that technology, and so that's why everything's air cooled now. I mean, water cooled now anyway. But yeah, as for the 944 turbo, yeah, the Callaway 944 that they built was making nearly 285 horsepower. So Porsche could have came in and done that easily, and probably done it better. They could have probably put a ton more power in there, but yeah, they didn't want to encroach on their 911. Aiden says, good afternoon, Brent. Well, good afternoon. Curtis says, hi. And today, the 944 family won't share races against its fellow competitors. Magic Square says, sorry, that's a reference to the 300ZX. So where was that? Let me see. I wanted to see the comment. Magic Square. What was your comment? Oh, it says, not to mention the weight difference. Oh, yeah, the difference between the 300ZX. Yeah. Okay. Mark says, please don't butcher a 944 by putting a V8 into it. The brakes and drivetrain not designed for it. Yeah, that's why you got to beef it up. You got to beef it up. Of course, I am of the mind, if I'm going to own one personally, I might as well just go buy a Corvette if that's what I want. But hey, that's what people want. I mean, back when muscle cars like the Corvette were barely breaking 200 horsepower. Yeah, well, and barely under 8 seconds too. It's like, people are like, the 944 does 0 to 60 in like 8 seconds. Yeah, and the 1992 Camaro with a V8 in it did it in 8.2. So what's your point? I had a 5-liter V8 and it was barely in the 8-second range, Porsche was also like pretty pessimistic with these cars too. They'd take it out, rainy day, and they'd be like, ah, that's what it does. Tire technology was not very good back then either. I'm not going to say that you, and they also didn't build cars. So you have to think about it this way too. So when it comes to like 0 to 60, you got to just take it with a grain of salt. If Porsche wanted their car to like be a 0 to 60 in 7.5 second, 7.5 seconds, all they had to do was like literally either raise the rev limit or put a different gear ratio in there, because you're changing right before 60, and that takes about a half a second. So now you're out of second gear, you can only do like 58 miles an hour in, and then you got to change gear. You wasted half a second. They could have made that up. But muscle car guys back in the day knew that, and you see those numbers being lowered because they would GM and Ford and all those people, they were crazy about that stuff, so they wanted it to do that. So they'd gear it so that way you did like 45 in first gear. Now that didn't make the car faster. No, not really. It's not geared properly, but is it true that the engine in the 944 is a V8 from the 928 sawed in half? Well, not really. Um, it's essentially half the size, yeah, because it was a 5 liter. Well, I think when the 928 came out, it was like a 4.5 liter or something. Later on, it was a 5 liter, but so the pistons would have been different because obviously. I think the 4.5 liter, I don't believe they used 100 millimeter pistons in there unless they destroked it or something. But yeah, I mean, if you look at both engines, they look very, very similar. They were developed at the same time. Well, let's say developed around the same time. The 928 came out, what, 78? Yeah, they would have been developing at about the same time. I mean, basically the heads are practically identical. There are some 928 parts on the 944. '77 928 was the 4.5 liter. 5 liter appeared in Europe. Okay, yeah, so it wouldn't exactly be that. So I'm guessing that there'd be 95-ish pistons in the 928. Maybe some smaller valves. I don't think you could destroke it that much. I mean, I guess you could. A whole half liter out of a stroke? Yeah, no, I don't think that'd happen. But you can shrink the piston down and lose a whole half a liter. One of my 928 S4 motors has a 951 rods. Yeah, so they did start sharing parts later on. And I know there's some 928 parts here on the engine. I believe the cam tower, the cam housing is unique to the 944 just due to, you're not going to have this firing order there. And so it was a 928 housing, then obviously it probably look exactly the same, but it wouldn't have the firing order like that. It would probably be whatever that bank is for that. So this is the bank with 1 through Ford, and you'd probably be like whatever. But that cap back there. So I guessed right. 77 was a 95 millimeter bore. Okay, cool. I just pulled that completely out of nowhere, just guessing. So J Fusion says, what would you recommend mods wise to get a non-S turbo to 300 horsepower? Oh, you're gonna need chip, obviously. then you probably want to go, I would do, you're gonna do it right. Get an electronic wastegate controller, and you might want to upgrade the wastegate while you're at it. Get a go ahead and get a dual port with a electronic controller, and you'll be happy. Set it to where you want it. Now, why do I suggest doing that rather than a manual boost controller? Day and night difference. So with a manual boost controller, like with a knob on there, you say, okay, I want the boost to stop around, let's say 18 psi. Well, it takes up until 18 psi before it starts bleeding off. Basically, it's just a regulator like you see on an air compressor. With an electronic, so with that in mind, your wastegate's going to be slowly opening the entire time. So you're trying to build speed, but that wastegate's just slowly opening the entire time, even with a manual. It's not like it just suddenly pops open. It's open the whole time until it reaches its max and it limits the boost. When you get into doing electronic, then it goes, hey, he's trying to accelerate because I see that he's just floored the car. So it holds the wastegate shut. And even when you're trying to pass, so it's trying to blow off some of that like pretty much all the time. So if you're cruising, it's going to probably have the wastegate closed because you're not building any boost anyway. But when you go to step on it and you have a manual boost controller, your wastegate's going to be open just ever so slightly because the air is always constantly going to be past it. But with a electronic wastegate, it sees what you're trying to do. It says, oh, he's trying to build boost. So it closes the wastegate and you build boost faster. And it's a day and night difference. But 300 horsepower on the non-S turbo is very easy to get. Could you explain the wires behind the relay panel for the blower fans on the heater blower? The wires behind the relay panel for the blower fans and the heater blower. Currently fixing the wire. Are you talking about the let's see if I got a car in here. It's 89. Does it have? So an 86. Why is this one inside? This is an 87. It should have them outside. I think you're talking about the resistors for the fans. But no, you got an 83. So wait, let me think of 83. Behind the relay panel for the blower fans and the heater blower. Oh. Okay, I had to put my mind in the 83. 83 land, so there we go, okay. So I'm guessing you're talking about the resistor here. I don't have one on hand right now, but essentially how this works is you've got positive and negative going to your fan, of course. And this here is going to be a ground. So and there's a resistor going across here. So if you know how resistors work, there's just a coil of wire in here. And the further it is apart, like they could be miles of copper wire in here. So essentially that comes out to being like miles and miles that has to travel, and it creates a resistance. So say this is where your ground comes in. It's a solid ground coming straight from the battery. But by the time it reaches this other side here, now your blower runs at low speed. And then if you move it to here, then you get a medium speed out of it. You see kind of where I'm going with this. And then if you have it over here, then you get full speed because the ground just comes straight back out and you get full speed at the ground. Well, that's basically it. And if you ever have that melt, then it's time to do that. So no problem. I understand completely. So this is on my phone and it is extremely tiny. So if I didn't have my glasses, I'm just completely useless. Um, any recommendations for an electronic boost? So the thing about those things, that type of stuff there is that changes pretty much yearly. There's always something new coming out with them. Um, I mean, it's the same idea, but I would just Google around and just Google, hey, best electronic boost controller. And it may be expensive, but you know, find one that's in your budget. They're all going to essentially, you don't want one that's going to fail on you, but hopefully it fails in a safe way. But those things are, it's one of those things where I knew years ago the one I used, and I don't even think that company's around anymore. So, and there's probably a million things that have come along since then. Dacker says hi. Well, hello, Dacker. Hope everybody's having a great day. I know my 968 has the tile wastegate. How does that work? Oh, they're pretty good. Yeah. You want to? I'm hearing something outside. But yeah, it works the same way as the stock wastegate for the most part. They're just better technology over time. I don't know if that helps you any or not, but is there such thing as a transmission rebuild for the manual 944NA? Do you know anyone nearby that does this kind of work? So, yes, I know people that rebuild them. It's not cheap. So, basically, what we'll do here is that I don't try and get too much in the weeds with stuff. I already get too much in the weeds with engine builds, unfortunately. But I like doing those. The transmission stuff gets a little bit wild sometimes as you throw that into the mix. So we'll do the seals. We'll change all the seals out, and we'll even crack it open and remove the back half and replace the gaskets and stuff. That's about the end of it. I don't get into the gearing, and if the synchros are bad, we just get another one and we just clean it out and reseal that. But there are guys that do it, but it's not cheap. So if you've got a bad transmission, you might be better off, you know, if you're willing to learn it, there is a transmission volume of the factory service manual. So, but I will say that. But I think his name, look up Kevin Gross. If you need your transmission rebuilt, then there are people that are doing it, but yeah, be prepared. Is there anyone that can help me with let's see. Got it handled. I'm a little late on the stuff, but we got it. Well, usually. Mm. There we go. Okay, William says from one relay 3, so from relay 1 to relay 3, there is a wire that jumps from one to the other to trip the heater blower on. It's a purple black wire. Unsure why my Aegis 12 volts mine were snipped. Okay. From relay 1 to relay 3, there is a wire that jumps from one to the other to trip the heater blower on to its purple black wire. I'm sure mine gets. Okay, that's interesting. So keep in mind that the blower motor is supposed to run constantly, even when it's on to 0 on the early early dash. It still runs constantly. And the only time that you won't get power to it, and it does stop when you're driving the car, is when you, and keep in mind this is only for the early cars, is when you turn the AC on. So at that point, it triggers a relay and it shuts a flap and it takes the power away from the blower motor. So if you're unplugging relays, then you're probably playing around with the stuff meant for the AC to deactivate that, because there's not a relay that actually controls that. So from the switch right there that you turn inside the car to that, it's straight wired to the directly to the ground on the resistor there. So all those wires go straight to that resistor, and then it gets power, it gets its 12 volts through that series of relays, and by default it's always going to get power. So if you're cutting wires back there, you're probably cutting the wires to the whatever activates the relay when you turn the AC on. So that's my guess. I would have to look at the wiring diagram, but that's the way it works. Basically, your power wire comes from that relay, and anytime you turn the AC on, it actually cuts the power. So I think even if you remove that AC relay, by default, the blower still works. So keep that in mind. So whatever's being snipped back there is probably not got anything to do with that. So it's probably more AC related. All right, guys, I think that's gonna do it. We turned a episode where I thought we'd have to end early into quite an interesting one. William, one more question from William. He says, oh, then it's ignition power wire, not me cutting, fixing the loom. The person hacked up. Okay, I got you. Oh, he says it's an ignition power wire, not me cutting, but from fixing the loom that a person had hacked up. Yeah, that's never any fun. Yeah, don't. Yeah, if you turn the ignition switch on and it's always on, that's just the way it operates. I know a lot of people are like, why doesn't it cut off? It doesn't cut off. It's constantly on. So yeah, don't go chasing things that aren't there. That's the way it operates. Even on the later cars, that's the way it works. It's if you're hearing something clicking inside and it's driving you crazy, you can clean the leaves out of it. Otherwise, it's it's supposed to be completely silent. Let's see. DJ Patrick says, hi guys, adjusted the headlights on my 84 since I had to replace it up. Awesome. Jay Fusion says, thanks again for all the advice. No problem. It's always fun to come and hang out with you guys. Yeah. He says, thank you. Didn't know I was always on, so I think I have it right then. Yep. Sounds good. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I've got some stuff that we'll get into and we'll have a little bit of fun with. But hopefully, I'll see you next week on Sunday. We'll see how it turns out. But if not, I'll give you a heads up. Probably at the last minute like I did this week. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.